All right, I have gotten myself into our story today, and our story is New France, New Home, written by Heather Wright. Now, this is my first time checking out the story, so I'm going to go through and I am going to just skim it. I'm just going to look for it. I might look at the picture here. I see two girls rocking and rolling over here. What else do I see? I see that they're on a boat. I can see that there's a couple of words that I might not know. Okay, I'm seeing some of my vocab words. Bachelor, that was a vocab word. That's really easy. Oh, that looks like painting. I'll just kind of look over here. King Louis the 14th, we talked about him in the lesson. That's familiar to me. I wonder, brown hair, rosy cheeks. If I go back up here, is that the same girl? Brown hair, rosy cheeks? I think that's the same girl. What else do I see? Okay. All right. I'm excited to start. I'm going to be reading through as you find those vocab words that we learned from the new presentation. I am excited for you to follow along. The wind snapped in the sails as the wooden ship plowed through the Atlantic. Marie and Eloise, both 14 years old, climbed out onto the deck for the first time in a week. Their knees were wobbly, their stomachs were churning. Mon Dieu! My God, that means in French, said Marie to her friend. Huh? You look green. So do you, said Eloise, but at least we're still alive. Yes, we are still alive. Marie looked at her friend's faint smile. And we will survive. 2 months earlier, back in France, oh, so they're from France. Marie and Eloise had been excited to finally be free of the orphanage. We know that word, that was our vocab word. With a dowry from King Louis himself. They were going to New France to find adventure and husbands. In May of 1671, Marie and Eloise joined nearly 100 other filles du roi on the sixth ship to travel to Quebec, Mr. Geving's favorite spot, with potential wives for the men of the colony. Soon, now I go back up to the top. Soon after they departed, Marie had joked that all the good men would be taken before the ship arrived. One of the chaperones, another vocab word, we know that one, that's someone who takes care of somebody else. One of the chaperones had replied that the girls were lucky to have a chance to marry anyone at all. As a poor orphan, Marie knew this was true. Still, she and her companions dreamed of finding happiness in New France. So I've learned a few things so far. I learned that Marie and Eloise, that must be these two, are orphans who are 14-year-old coming from France. They are filles du roi, which is kind of like girls of the king. That's what that would translate to. But as the weeks had dragged by and their excitement faded, many of the girls had grown weak from seasickness. They tried to choke down the salt pork and the hard biscuits that they were given, but some just couldn't eat. When bad weather kept them below deck, two had grown so ill that they nearly died. It had been a difficult voyage, but now, finally, a watery sun was shining, and the girls were able to escape the rank smells of their sleeping quarters. Marie breathed in the cool, salty air and hummed to herself. Things were looking up. That does not sound like a very fun voyage, does it? First sights of New France. Days later, the ship left the ocean for the journey up the St. Lawrence River to Quebec, Mr. Geving's favorite spot. The girls stood on deck and stared at the land that was to be their home. When they learned they were close to their destination, many ran to change their clothes and fix their hair. They wanted to make a good first impression. Their efforts weren't wasted. These were scores of men waited at the dock when the ship finally anchored. Marie stared at the eager faces looking up at the latest batch of filles du roi. Would one of these strangers soon be her husband? The girls lined up to leave the ship and walk to the convent that would be their home until they were married. They smiled shyly as they passed the young men. Keeping a respectful distance, the men smiled back. When they reached their quarters at the convent, the girls collapsed with exhaustion. Marie and Eloise were asleep in moments, but the nuns knew that after a few days' rest, the girls would be strong again. I wonder if the nuns are their chaperones, that other vocab word that we were looking at. That would be quite the experience, wouldn't it, to show up into a new land and try to find a husband, and at the age of 14 too. A bachelor comes calling. That's another vocab word. In the following days and weeks, many potential husbands traveled up the road to the nunnery. 19-year-old Pierre de Louis was among them. He was a habitant with a well-established farm. Habitant. Habitant. That sounds like the word habitat or inhabitant, doesn't it? Habitant. And I know the word inhabitant means someone who lives somewhere. If you are an inhabitant of St. Peter, you live in St. Peter. Even though he was worried that he might be turned down because of his plain looks, he knew he had to try for a wife. Jean Talon, the intendant of New France, said that if the young men of his colony didn't marry, they would have to pay a fine. So this Jean Talon seems like they are a pretty powerful person if they're going to make someone pay a fine. Maybe that's like a governor. Pierre lined up with the other men until he was called into a small room. Inside was a nun sitting behind a table. Sister Catherine stared at him, sizing him up. She asked him questions about his family and his health. She asked if he drank or had bad habits. He couldn't tell if she approved of him or not. So, monsieur, she said sternly, I suppose you too want the most beautiful girl we have for your wife. Oh no, sister. I know that such a wife is not for me. His voice trailed away. I'm going to come back to this box when I'm done. You want something, Louis? What is it? Her eyes were curious and cold. I might as well tell her, he thought, but what if it's asking for too much? I was hoping for a girl who likes to sing. Sing, Sister Catherine repeated sharply. Just that morning she heard one of the girls singing during chores. She murmured. Then she stood and she left the room. Pierre clutched his new hat, twisting the brim with his strong hands. What have I done? A match is made. Marie! Sister Catherine's voice rang up the stairs to the young girl's bedroom. I'd like you to meet someone. Marie felt frozen to the floor. Eloise jumped off the bed where she had been sitting and gave Marie a hug. See, I told you it would be your turn soon. I hope you are as lucky as I've been. Eloise gave her a push. Go, go, then hurry back and tell me everything. Marie smoothed her hair and then hurried down the stairs. There's a young man here who's hoping for a girl who sings, said Sister Catherine. She looked at Marie's white face and patted her kindly on the shoulder. Come along, Marie, she whispered. You're serving your king, remember? Marie remembered, but it didn't make her feel much better. When she entered the room, she looked at the young man Sister Catherine had chosen. He wore wool pants, moccasins, and an animal skin coat cinched with a ceinture flèche. I wonder what that word is, but I can figure out that if he's like cinching down his coat, ceinture, this kind of sounds like center, flèche. I don't know what that word is, but it's probably something that holds his coat together. When you don't know a word in a sentence, that's one of the options you can do is you can figure it out by using context clues. He smelled of wood smoke. Oh, I love that smell. And the soap he washed with that morning. He wasn't really handsome, but his skin was clear and tanned. His brown eyes glimmered when she said hello. Sister Catherine retreated to a far corner of the room. No one spoke. He's shy, thought Marie. With a small smile, she said, I was told you want a girl who likes to sing? Why? When Pierre heard her voice, his heart soared. If only this pretty girl would take him. My mother sang to me and my brothers and my sisters every night before bed. Her beautiful voice is the most important memory of my childhood. I wish similar memories for my own children, if, he blushed, if I ever have a family. Marie felt herself blushing, too. For a moment she pictured herself years later, singing softly to Pierre and their children. Though love wasn't there yet, Marie suspected that this man was right for her. Pierre was nervous. She hadn't said anything, and she was looking at him strangely. If you don't want me, he stammered. I mean, my brother told me I was too homely for anyone to marry, so maybe I should just go. Marie smiled and took a deep breath. You certainly may go, she said, but only to tell your brother how wrong he is and to invite him to our wedding. The end. Now, I left a box open, didn't I? This one. Daughters of the King. I'd like to know more about what Marie and Eloise were doing. I wonder if this box will tell me. Daughters of the King. In the early 1660s, there were only about 3,000 settlers living in New France. Mr. Geving's favorite spot. And most of them were men. Without more women, the population couldn't grow. King Louis XIV and his government knew something had to be done. In 1663, they began to send girls to New France to marry the men there. These girls were called filles du roi, daughters of the king. Most came from orphanages or poor farming families. Between 1663 and 1673, that's 10 years, nearly 800 filles du roi arrived in New France. Most of them got married soon after they arrived. Slowly, families began to grow, and so did the population of the colony. I wonder who these people are. I mean, these are clearly the girls, right? These are the filles du roi. And I wonder if that would be the king, the royal. He's got a cross on, so he must be something with religion. And they look like they're kind of helpers. This one looks like the most important, and I think I can pick up on that because he's the only one who's dressed really super nice, isn't he? He's dressed nice, but he's got a sword. He looks like he's kind of the focus point. All right, so this was a good story, and our observations proved true. It was about these two girls, and I hope you enjoyed this story.